Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin. The Surgeon General just came out with a report saying that social media could cause grave danger for our young people, for our adolescents. So I'm joined now by child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders from the Premier Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut. And I know you help a lot of kids with all kinds of problems. Was this any surprise to you that the Surgeon General was saying social media really can have an effect on young people's mental health?
Well, it's not a surprise, Kara. And, you and I have talked about this a bunch of times before. And, we've even talked about in 2021, there was a fairly comprehensive study that came out looking at all the different research on social media and teens, and there was nothing hugely conclusive. So I think it's important to take this as a significant warning, which it needs to be, to highlight some of the major concerns, but the effects are still not widely known.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about how there's definitely a youth mental health crisis, and that is known. But this report coming out, does it necessarily mean that social media is really driving it, or it was kind of happening before?
I think in a lot of different circumstances, we're looking at a multifactorial view. We're not really sure that this one thing causes another. It's more considered what we call correlational, that teens who've got a bunch of different stressors, and let's not forget that we are coming out of a global pandemic. There's multiple different stressors, but social media seems to be a theme. I think one of the statistics in the report was that 95% of youth between 13 and 17 use social media. And as I say, 5% were lying. So it's impacting everyone. And I think like a third of that 95% use it heavily or use it really consistently.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I'm a parent of teens. I know you are a parent of teens as well, and a little older in college. But I mean, it seems unrealistic to just say you're never using social media, because then do we fall into that helicopter parent where they're all using it and we're trying to control too much?
So that's a good point. I read in the report that the Montana governor has banned TikTok. And while, that is certainly a social media platform, I don't know that banning something is really the way to address this. I mean, if we go back to our history, we know, when alcohol was banned during Prohibition, it just led people to go around corners and do things against the law. And I don't know that banning something really is the direction to go here. I think having thoughtful conversations, having monitoring things, providing supervision, providing guidance, and having electronic free times is really the way to go. I don't know that banning things is going to be all that helpful.
So as parents, what can we do? I know part of it is, I guess we have to be good role models ourselves with how we use our devices.
What's recommended is that as a family, you have a social media plan. Or really, I don't even want to focus so much on social media, especially for younger kids. I want to focus on electronics and devices, that we have times that are, device free, meal times, social times, certain family times, that there's breaks during the day, certainly on a weekend when there's less structure, that there are device free times. And one of the things that the report said is that what's being most negatively affected by use of devices is sleep and exercise, time outside, time to just run around and play and do silly things that young people, children and teens should be doing. So those are two very significant things. Exercise, free time, time outside, and sleep are two things that are being negatively affected.
Yeah, and sometimes I guess it could be like food, right? Where rather than just saying you can never have the bad stuff, we try to crowd it out with the good stuff. So what you're saying is, if you get them involved in sports, or they're going out and hanging out with friends, like the report also stressed they need to have real friendships. But if we do enough of that, maybe it limits the time that they're sitting by themselves scrolling.
Now, I do know that sometimes I've seen not just my own kids, but other teens together, and they're talking, but they're also on devices and talking and on devices. I mean, that's a little better than just being by themselves in their room on a device. Because often what they're doing is they're saying, oh, I just saw this, and then it creates conversation. You know, my hope would be that you can really make it so that there are times where you're just, you know, interacting.
Yeah. You know, I have a little bet in my family, not that my kids could actually pay for a dinner bill, but my brothers have a little problem with this too, and they're in their 60s. So I'll say everyone has to put a phone on the table when we're going out to dinner. Whoever touches it, you know, pays. And everyone's resistant to do that at first, but I do notice when everyone's doing it, like, everyone's so much better. Their behavior is better. They're talking better. Like, I mean, it's like once myself too, we're just more engaged.
Right. We're all more engaged when we're off our phones. And it does create kind of like an anxiety effect. So where it's, you know, that ding goes off and everyone's ding's a little different on what tells them that, you know, there's a post that's come up, or there's, you know, a message. You know, it happens to all of us. It's like, oh, there's a ding, something's waiting for me. It creates this anticipatory anxiety. And it's, you know, that anticipatory anxiety kind of builds and builds and builds. And it's like, oh, I need to just check and see what it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes it's labeling things, right? So, right, it happens to me too. I'm out with someone, you know, I know my phone dings. I know, I always think it's my kids trying to, you know, something's bad has happened, right? We go right to an anxiety thought. And it's just realizing that it's going to be okay. Right. I'm not saying bad things don't ever happen, but it's okay to wait. It's okay to wait, you know, maybe until you go to the bathroom. Delaying your response time is a way that you can help deal with that sort of anticipatory anxiety.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I do the same thing, and my phone will be on vibrate, but if I feel it, I assume, like, I got to check, I'm a mom. I mean, we all have these excuses, and I'm sure the kids do too. Like, I have to, you know, you pick your battles, but if you take a kid's phone away, I mean, they sometimes move into full-on threat mode where they're just miserable to deal with, you know, if it's a punishment or something like that. So I guess
that's like an addictive response, right?
Right.
It's like if you take the gambling away, or the alcohol away, or the substance away, it's like an addictive response. And that's what makes it so kind of scary sometimes. For young people, is that anxiety and arousal gets heightened, and it's almost like you've just taken my addiction away.
Yeah. So what can we realistically do? I know you usually take a middle of the road approach. You know, let's say I know what you would say for little kids is different than maybe 13 and above. I mean, this report said, you know, 13 is too young, but obviously we know most 13-year-olds are doing this. So what can we start, especially with that middle school age where all the kids are starting to use it more and they want to feel like they're included?
This report really is focusing on 13 to 17-year-olds because they're the only ones that can access social media. We know that we know that younger people are on devices. They play video games. Sometimes they have phones. They have other kinds of devices that they use. But this report, I think, is specifically targeting 13 to 17-year-olds. The other thing that it's also focusing on is the fact that adolescents are not just smaller adults, right? That their brains are different, that their development is different, that they have different social and emotional needs. And so to really look at things from a different lens, given this age group, you know, having a plan, the younger you start, the better, right? If you start at 10, 11, 12, 13, that's easier than implementing a brand new plan at age 16 or 17. And, you know, to use your leverage as a parent, and I'm going to guess that most parents are actually paying for these devices. Children are not paying for them. So just have a plan about reducing use, having screen-free times, having times where you're outside and doing things. So compensatory activities. But again, this is a lot of work on parents' part. It's another thing that they have to monitor and look after.
Yeah, and that's really also what this report encourages, that we be aware. And I know for some parents, it's confusing. They don't even, I mean, that's one of the reasons, right, that the kids are communicating more on Snapchat or TikTok, because those are probably the platforms their parents should know. on. They think Facebook is for old people.
Right. And a lot of times they're not even using text, they're using Snapchat, and they're using other ways to communicate. And, you know, I've worked with many parents and younger folks whose parents take the phone away for whatever legitimate reason that they take the phone away. And then the youth feel like they are now isolated. So they're wanting to connect. Now they're isolated. And I understand it's being used as a consequence. You know, parents might say, well, just use the telephone. That's something I would do. I mean, I would use the telephone to call you, but young people just don't use the phone. In fact, sometimes they don't even know how to use a phone and they don't know how to leave messages. So it's not just, you can't just switch over. So it's just being mindful well, and I also think shorter consequences tend to be more powerful than far longer consequences. It's just being mindful, being aware of as much as you can, providing some supervision, keeping lines of communication open. Again, this is not easy. These are not easy things to do. And it's another set of issues that parents have to regulate or keep track of. So I understand that it's a lot of extra work.
And yet you want us to do it. And I love your saying when it comes, because kids will say, this is my phone, you're invading my privacy, especially a teenager. And you have a good, the bottom line is most parents are paying for these phones and we want our kids to be safe. So you have a good little axiom between freedom and responsibility there. Right.
Privacy is not a right and trust is earned.
And that's what we say. I mean, I guess the kids are going to be upset about it, but the idea that we are allowed to look at their phones sometimes and that we are allowed, not that you're not going to respect some privacy. I guess we shouldn't be maybe going through every little thing that they're doing. It's, you know, they'll say it's the same as reading a diary, but help us understand, and maybe if the teens are listening to this, help us understand why, you know, kids will say, that's the same as reading my diary. It's not really, right?
It's not, because often young people don't realize that a lot of what they put out on the internet is for public consumption. You know, someone can even send a Snapchat, which is allegedly only lasts a few seconds, you know, take a screenshot of it, send it out to other people. I've worked with young people who would keep online diaries and then be shocked that someone accessed that allegedly private online diary and then expose them. And so the internet, there really is no privacy on the internet. And in that same vein, what a lot of these tech companies are doing is they create algorithms to track the kinds of things that you're looking at and how long you're looking at them. And then they send targeted ads. And then, you know, kids have these targeted ads and then they really want something else because it's been sort of targeted to what their interests or their desires are. So the tech companies really play a role in fueling a lot of this stuff, which is why I think, and this is pretty clear in the Surgeon General's report, is that some of these restrictions need to come from the top down. They do need to be enforced via policy. I'm not a fan of a complete ban on things because there's ways around that, and it just creates a lot more sneaky and behavior that's even harder to monitor. But there do need to be some policy changes.
How does social media affect, and the overuse of it, how does it affect girls and boys differently? Are they using it differently?
We've gone over this before. There's certain aspects of development where young people are more vulnerable, like, you know, right as they become moving into adolescence or you know, moving into middle school, moving into high school, looking at developmental stages that tend to have increased vulnerabilities. Actually, going from high school to college is a highly vulnerable stage for young women, especially. You know, any platform that allows you to, you know, filter, I couldn't think of the word, you know, have filters that make you, you know, you don't have a blemish and you look perfect and it slims you up, you know, that really affects body image. I mean, I was saying this 25 years ago when it came to magazine ads, how they would airbrush, you know, models in magazines and it would portray this image that to be beautiful, you had to be painstakingly thin. It's not that different now when people themselves can manipulate an image and then that's their profile. So they look absolutely perfect when no one is perfect. We all have problems, blemishes, your eyebrows, your nose, your whatever it is. We all have things that are imperfect about us. And so if it creates this sense that we need to be perfect to show it to the rest of the world, it creates a very unrealistic image.
And we know from documentaries and research on this, I mean, the smartest minds created these platforms. Not that there can't be some positive aspects of connection and all that, but they created these. Even Steve Jobs will admit the iPhone was created in a way to keep us addicted. Like it has an addictive, so literally it's triggering our dopamine the way that other addictive things like gambling and stuff will do. So these phones were created and the platforms were created to kind of addict the human mind. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no tech person, but yes, these absolutely were created to engage that arousal, right? There's like a physiological arousal that happens when the ding goes off on your phone. When you get another a like, or you get something. They have created these in this sort of addictive mindset so that it draws you in more. And once you're in, then you're in for extended periods of time. I always think of like the slot machine, right? The slot machines are designed to keep you pulling the lever, or I think it's pushing a button now, but in the old days it was pulling a lever. And it's an intermittent reinforcement so that it really kind of connects you in and keeps you going. It's designed in the same way.
And I guess I also think of it like, sometimes I have one child who posts a lot and one child who doesn't post at all, but I know that he's on it. So it's also what they're seeing, right? I mean, we don't let our child just go to see any movie or go any place. But yet when you're on a social media platform, you might be watching anything, violence, pornography. You really don't have much control once you're on there, I guess.
There is not much control. And, there absolutely is violent and sexual and other harmful content on there. That's a level of exposure that certainly younger teens don't need. I mean, older teens don't need it either. But as you get older, you just have access to things. So there are so many pitfalls, but I do want to highlight a couple of positives. I mean, we have to squeeze something in here.
Yeah.
And talk about the fact that, for those individuals who feel more vulnerable or who feel more kind of disconnected, it's a way to allow them to feel like they can find a group where they're more accepted, or there are people that support them. It can be a place to show creativity. So there are some benefits for some vulnerable individuals. While I certainly don't want that to be the sole means of connection for someone, that they only have online friends that live all around the world. I want people to have connections in real life. But for some people, it can be a sense of connection and support.
Yeah, and I've seen that too, right? If our kids have some friends from camp, it's a great way to foster those relationships so they feel less nervous when they see them again in the summer, or keeping in contact with old friends, or, all of that. So there is I know some folks in the autism community have come out and saying, quit trying to say that all social media is bad. Our children, it's like one place they feel normal because they're in these groups. So I want to, I guess you raised some good points, and maybe why you're also saying let's not just ban this. However, let's say you're listening to this and you want some action steps. I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, how do we script this as a parent? We're learning more, and a lot of it's not positive about what we're hearing about social media. So let's say we want to make some changes. We need to dial some things back in our house. Well, how does this scripting go so that we can have a positive conversation and actually get somewhere, rather than kids just melting down or thinking that we're being unreasonable or we're the only parents doing this to them?
Well, that's why I was tell parents or suggest to parents that they talk to other parents, that they talk to the parents of their friends, so you get a sense of what's going on with other children as well, other, same age peers, so that when they say, well, Johnny's mother doesn't ever, limit anything, you can say, well, I actually talked to Johnny's mother and I know that she does. He's just not telling you. So, that's where you kind of get a sense of connectivity with other other parents, but it is having kind of an electronic device plan, having downtimes, having break times. It's often doesn't work to go from one extreme to another, but to start to dial back, for every hour you play outside today, you can have a half hour on your phone tonight, something, where you reward positive pro-social behavior, the behavior that you want, with something that you sometimes need to tolerate. So it's doing things in a way that creates reinforcement for the behaviors that you want to see, as opposed to just throwing consequences out there.
So let's also talk about the battle of using screens while they're doing homework. I don't know if you have any advice for this, but kids will say they need their phones and don't take it away. And it seems to me like, how do you focus when you're got a phone near you? And let's say you have a homework battle already going on, but the battle becomes bigger because you're like, we're going to take all the devices away and you're just going to focus on this. It seems like kids don't want to do that now. Is there any reason that we should really engage in that battle? Is there, from a child psychologist perspective, is it okay for them to be using devices while they're trying to do homework?
Here's the reality. Often their Chromebooks or whatever laptop computers they have whatever apps they might be using on their phone. So you can think that you're a on the ball savvy parent and take their phone away while they're doing homework, but they're accessing things anyway. So that's why I want to focus on, and while I hate multiple screens at one time, I used to say this to my kids all the time, the reality is that's how they have just learned over the years to process information.
Yeah.
So you can take a phone away, but their laptop or whatever, remember, they're doing homework now on a screen. This is not just, in a notebook with a big old textbook the way that we did it. They're doing things on screens. So that's why, like, saying, no, you can never have your phone while you're doing homework. Well, that's fine, because they just have the apps on their laptop anyway. So we think, I don't want to develop a false sense that we're in control when control is limited, and we need to try to supervise, have, communication. And when there's a problem, when you see that your child's grades are failing, or when you see that they're not, no longer doing activities that they used to enjoy, when you see that their anxiety level seems to have gone through the roof, right now you're noticing that something's different, and it's going on for, it's not just a day or two, but a more protracted period of time. That's when you need to have some deeper conversations or look at some bigger interventions.
And the bigger interventions might be therapy. And I'm not saying everyone who's having a problem with social media should go to therapy, but I know a lot of kids are also resistant to see someone like you. And there's also that access issue. But even if a kid isn't, say, medically necessary, and they're going through difficulties as a teen, does it make sense to take them to child therapy?
Well, I think we all would do better with a little therapy. However, there's not enough psychologists and clinical social workers and marriage and family therapists out there to even, address everyone. So there's other platforms to use. I mean, you can check in with your school support personnel if you're really concerned about your child. Check in with your school support personnel or your teachers based on how old they are. In middle school and high school, it's harder to check in with teachers because there's multiple teachers. Find out, what they see going on. Are there concerns about other kids in school? Are there any trends that you're missing? Maybe having a school social worker check in with your child to, just get a set of eyes on someone that's outside the family. So there's, if it's becoming serious and you think there might even be a medical component, or you don't know if there's a medical component, checking in with your pediatrician or family practitioner. So there's ways to do things. There's kind of steps before you go all the way to therapy. And most towns have, a child and youth services or child and family services. Yep. So that's important to access as well.
And the low-hanging fruit, I know you said sleep and nutrition. I mean, big problem with why the Surgeon General found problems with social media was that kids might be missing sleep over it. And let's hope that you're not keeping it, near their pillows and that it's going off all night. But that's a big problem too, is if they're just playing video games or getting social media all night long.
Right.
The sleep
matters.
That
ding or that beep, affects you, in the arousal centers of your brain, and we want the arousal centers to kind of be shut off in order to sleep.
Yeah.
So the dings and the beeps and the buzzes, brings your arousal to the forefront, and now you're in a lighter level of sleep instead of getting deep sleep. I mean, it really does have some profound effects on sleep.
So in our last couple of moments to wrap it up, what do you see for the future? Is this Surgeon General report really just something that's coming out because now the government is going to do that top down, where we expect more regulations for these social media companies?
The reality is, this is not a mandate. There's no mandate for the government to act, but a report of this nature really gives us some information and evidence that there is a problem. There is a significant child mental health problem that we need to address. So I hope that, lawmakers and policymakers, I would like to believe tech companies want to do the right thing, but often they just want to make the biggest profit. But we need to have a better plan than the sort of free-for-all that exists now.
Well, we did come up with laws that tobacco companies and alcohol companies couldn't market to kids, even though that used to be the case, right? And let's be honest, like Snapchat isn't really, 40-year-old women are not usually on Snapchat. They want the kids, and then they can say that I've got the young demo. So the idea that we would regulate it a little bit. But in the meantime, I guess you would advise that parents, that middle of the road approach is having those discussions and use the technology that we have, like the screen times, the things that shut the phones off. Suggest that
Yes.
we're all leaving our phones in the kitchen, or at least it's shut off. I know my kids freak out and say they use it as an alarm, but there's other ways to do alarms too.
Yeah, there are other ways to do alarms. So it's really trying to create limits, not taking an all or nothing approach.
Limits, not an all or nothing approach. All right. So in your final thoughts, your final minutes to all the moms and dads that might be listening, what's your advice to them in this tricky time?
Parenting's the hardest job in the world. Do the best that you can. Try to, put a little energy into this and create more communication, add in a little supervision to see what's going on. And, it's not easy because the tech is far ahead of, what the adults are aware of.
Yeah. But kids also probably, I've heard this before, and I like to believe it's true, that they may say they don't like it, but they need our limits, and later on we'll appreciate it.
Yeah, much later on.
Much later on. Okay, we're waiting for that time. Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living, we so appreciate you sharing your wisdom on this brand new Surgeon General report. Lots for parents to think of. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara.
And thanks for being here for Kara's Cures, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. You can follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin and join the Kara's Cures Facebook group. I do like to share this content there. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.